Chapter 7. Winner, Cassia Fox. I. Lost. The event Snake sat back in his chair, exhausted even though he had been playing a simulation. The desperate dodging, the careful shots, that impulsive dive at the end. The high-intensity action echoed with his heart. He did not even begrudge his loss to Cassia Fox. That final dive had been an attack that would have resulted in a Pyrrhic victory at best. Fighting in a way that killed 1,000 men while losing 800 might be fine in Iron Spirit where repairs were cheap and fast. In the real universe, such a reckless action was a good way to find yourself into a coffin or retired to a desk job. Triceratops SSS, that was amazing. Oh. This event Snake, I know. I'm going to pay for it in repairs. Triceratops SSS, man, you really should have one. That dive was so brilliant, especially the way you contorted your mech at the last moment. This event Snake, nah, I deserve that loss. I was too caught up in the moment to realize the Fantasia's legs couldn't possibly penetrate the shell of an Excelsior. For all his practice sessions, he still lacked the maturity and experience of an actual pilot. He was still young, so he could afford to make those kinds of mistakes. Triceratops SSS, so how was the Seraphim? Do you regret buying it? This event Snake, it's definitely worth it, though I can't say the same for everyone. It has a very uneven performance. As long as you have enough energy, it's great, but if you run out, you're dead. I have a feeling I'm not going to be finished performing diving attacks. Triceratops SSS, yeah, it would suck if you have to face off against a heavy mech again. They could just tire you out. So how does it compare to your other flight mechs? This event Snake, the firepower isn't the best. It's fast and agile, but it came at a cost to armor and endurance. It's the perfect long-ranged harasser, but there's other mechs that can do the same job a little better. Still, I like this mech. It's really beautiful and I love the cloud generator. It makes me want to pilot this mech all day. Triceratops SSS, do you mind if I share the replay with the others? This event Snake, haha sure. Do what you want. While this event Snake dove back into the arena, Triceratops SSS sent the replay to his friends with a note to check out the new variant. Not everyone watched it, as a lot of them were not in the game or weren't interested. Those that did found the Seraphim to be a very impressive-looking variant of the old Fantasia. Only when they searched for the mech in the marketplace did they receive a fright. Some of them even left disparaging comments in the mech store page. 8,800 gold apiece. I don't even earn that much in a year. Whoever pays 3,300 credits for this underspeced mech is an idiot. FC King, get your brain checked, you greedy price gouger. This mech is too sexist. There's no reason at all enlarge its front chest. Mechs don't wear bras. Some of these potentates forwarded the replay to their other friends and mentioned the Seraphim's price. This caused a further ripple in admiration over the mech's beauty and scorn over its price. In the end, the sensation died down and nobody took the plunge to purchase the mech. In the meantime, this event Snake kept throwing himself into solo matches. He achieved a record of 12 wins and 5 losses so far, an impressive ratio, but nothing to boast about. Very few flying mechs appeared in the Bronze League, so some pilots went into battle without carrying ranged weapons. These hot-blooded youths who wanted to get right into the opponent's face could only cry as the Seraphim gracefully drew a rainbow in the air while pelting them with energy bolts. Only snipers and heavy mechs posed a threat to him. Their advantage in firepower or armor was so decisive that they had the Seraphim in the palm of their hands. The next match proved to be the most exciting one of the day for this event Snake. His opponent surprisingly piloted another flying mech. Player profile. Nickname, Dire Wolf. League, Bronze. Wins over losses over draws, 524 over 360 over 3. Equipped mech, Lost Constellations Model VF5 Custom. Weight classification, medium? Damn, this is a scary opponent. What is up with that insane win ratio? I've never seen a ratio that high in the Bronze League. This event Snake was sweating in his seat. The mech model also caused him to raise his vigilance. The Lost Constellations Company was one of the more mysterious mech manufacturers even way back then at the start of the age of mechs. They adhered to a different design philosophy and were the first to introduce animal-shaped mechs in the battlefield. The famed Model VF had been designed like a vulture. It traded speed for power and endurance. Though slow to catch up to any light mechs, it pumped out powerful shells from its cannons that could even shred heavy armor as long as it fired long enough. Though its ammunition was prone to run in extended battles, the Model VF was still able to pose a threat in melee range with its powerful reinforced claw and beak attacks. The VF5 his opponent piloted was undoubtedly a customized variant. Anything could be different from its stock model. The event snake had no way of guessing what his opponent preferred, and simply reserved his judgment. The battlefield finally loaded, revealing an empty urban environment. The map consisted entirely of a densely packed downtown city. Metal skyscrapers blocked the views of both players while also diminishing the effectiveness of their sensors. I could get ambushed easily by the VF if I blunder around. It's best to wait for my opponent to come to me. The event snake deduced. He chose to ascend straight up and chose a random, mid-sized skyscraper to land upon. The roof offered plenty of space but very little cover. The seraphim turned off its wings before extending its hair sensors. This time the event snake maintained a passive scan. Essentially he just extended his mech's ears and hoped to catch a sound made by the enemy. This time he wanted to get a drop on his enemy. If he could take the time to make his first shot, he might be able to cripple the VF's wings. He stayed patient as 5 minutes passed. The time limit for a solo battle was 30 minutes, so he had plenty of time to spare. He was prepared to stand there and wait 25 minutes if necessary. He really couldn't relax against an opponent with such an impressive win record. The sweat trickled down the back of his neck as he continued waiting patiently. The alarm at the 13th minute almost threw him off the seat. Finally, you moved. The seraphim retracted its sensors, turned around and carefully approached the edge of the roof in the direction of the opponent. He spotted the VF-5 hovering at a generous pace, reserving its speed but making sure to keep up a juking pattern in its flight. He's trying to draw me out. And he doesn't know my Fantasia is sporting a flight system. The enemy was aware the Fantasia boasted a considerable sensor range. Instead of fruitlessly trying to search the seraphim, he instead flew around seemingly lazily. The VF-5's flight appeared slow, but it held considerable power in reserves. The VF-5 had a number of short-range boosters underneath its wings to assist with dodging and carrying out swooping attacks. The event snake chose to take his time to aim. His sensors had detected the VF-5 a fair distance away. Together with all the sensor pollution the crowded urban environment offered, he had a 90% certainty the enemy hadn't spotted him yet. The Seraphim's red eye module shone a little brighter as it locked onto the VF-5's left cannon, just underneath its wing. Since he hadn't received any sniper training, the event snake fired upon the moment he felt a buzz. The energy bolt that left the DMRS barrel soared through the air in a rapid flight towards the vulture-like mech. The VF-5, perhaps caught off guard by the projectile's unexpected angle, reacted too late. The wing and the barrel of its left cannon took a glancing blow. It resulted in minor damage to the VF-5's flight systems, but the damage the barrel sustained made the weapon inoperable. Dire Wolf seemed to be enraged as the VF-5 opened its beak to let out a piercing scream. This sound wave disrupted Seraphim's lock on the vulture-like mech, causing him to miss his follow-up shots. The VF-5 explosively activated all of its boosters, ascending quickly towards the Seraphim. The event snake abandoned his position and took to the skies himself. The Seraphim widened the distance while continuing to fire back at the enraged vulture. The VF-5 could only helplessly dodge the shots while trying to keep up. It excelled at bullying ground mechs by shredding them with its powerful cannons, but with one already disabled and the other firing out of its effective range, the vulture performed rather poorly. Only its secondary machine guns achieved consistent hits, but their caliber was so small that even the Fantasia could tank a few bullets as long as they didn't land in the same location. However, it somehow suffered only glancing blows on its chassis so far. The event snake kept trying to hit the VF-5's essential systems, such as its wings or its engine, but only managed to clip armor or negligible systems. This bastard's dodging pattern is strange. The event snake grew more suspicious as his shots kept leading away from where he wanted them to go. I got it. He's fooling my aim assist. The early versions of aim assistance were easy to fool. Certain movement patterns easily led its internal computers to overcompensate its aim in a faulty direction. This wasn't easy to accomplish in practice. It took an unusually avid mech pilot to even be aware of this solution. In any case, now that he knew what was wrong, he disabled the red eye. This pretty much had an immediate impact on his DMRS accuracy. His shots spread much wider now, sometimes missing the vulture by 30 meters even. He couldn't help it. Firing a rifle in midair was hard enough. Traveling swiftly while trying to dodge the vulture's return fire only added to the instability. Nevertheless, the almost perfectly random distribution of shots threw the vulture off guard for a second time. Since even the Seraphim's pilot couldn't predict where his shots landed, his opponent could forget about figuring out a pattern. The exchange continued on for a handful of minutes. The VF-5 appeared miserable as its chassis sported a lot of scorch marks and ran low on ammunition. It succeeded in preserving its important systems, only suffering major damage to its massive wings. The Vulture was built to be robust among the flyers, so even if it lost half its wings, it still maintained its capability to stay afloat. The Seraphim on the other hand survived the sporadic barrage of solid projectiles with a few dents. It suffered an unlucky hit at the end when a cannon shell managed to hit the rival. The impact and subsequent explosion irretrievably wrecked the weapon, leaving the lightly armed Seraphim without a ranged weapon. Just as well. I only have a third of my energy left. Both sides knew this match would be decided up close. The Seraphim ceased running, turned around and approached the VF-5 cautiously while unsheathing its combat knife. The rainbow cloud spurting from its rear gave the angelic mech a majestic appearance, as if it was a queen that claimed the skies as its domain. The VF-5 let out an indignant cry from its beak as it accelerated in a sudden fashion, eager to challenge the interloper. While its half-wrecked wings reduced the power of its flight, its plentiful thrusters still provided a substantial amount of explosive acceleration. The Vulture flew out with its sharp and menacing claws stretched out. The force of its approach enough to wreck any Fantasia-based chassis in a head-on collision. The Event Snake flitted to the side and used his superior agility in the air to keep his mech safe. He swiped the VF-5 with his combat knife, scoring occasional hits but unable to deal any critical damage. The cloud generator spurted out so many colorful clouds that the streets were almost completely obscured. This didn't affect either mech's performance, as they both switched to alternate vision modes that could easily see through the clouds of vapor. Somehow the VF-5's pilot managed to orient his mech in a way that presented its most armored portion towards the Seraphim. This let the VF-5 use its abundant armor to block the small knife. If the Seraphim's arms possessed more power and carried a better weapon, then it would have carved the VF-5 apart by now. Instead, it had to dodge the VF-5's fatal claw strikes with every approach, suffering a few glancing blows in return, one of which simply sheared off both its legs at the knees. The Event Snake felt constricted, and as his energy reserves fell to the last 10%, he again staked odds to a final blow. He stopped dodging sideways and flew towards the VF-5 head-on. The Vulture noted the change in strategy and extended its claws and its beak in anticipation. At the last moment, the Seraphim chose to dodge to the bottom right, straight at one of the VF-5's claws. The reinforced limb tore through the Seraphim's thin armor plating. The angelic mech's head crunched loose while its torso had been sliced halfway through, disabling countless essential systems. The VF-5 suffered catastrophic damage in return. The Seraphim's combat knife sunk deep in its chest armor, and while it suffered little damage so far, the close-range strike possessed enough momentum to carve through its plates. Red liquid leaked out of the gaps. The Seraphim had succeeded in piercing the cockpit with its last gambit. Both mechs lost their propulsion and fell. Winner, the Event Snake. Vay's face soured as his eyes skimmed through his analytics page in iron spirit. Really, what am I paying so much crap for? I thought advertisements are supposed to work. He only had 20 days left to complete the system's mission of selling 100 virtual mechs. So far, Vay's only managed to sell his handcrafted Fantasia 2R Seraphim. That meant the other mechs he sold lacked his personal care and attention. Not only did their specs degrade, they also sold for twice its already ludicrous price. When Faze visited the Seraphim store page, he encountered hundreds of disparaging comments. 8,800 gold XD. Do you lack a few brain cells? Are you autistic? Then go ahead and buy this gold-plated piece of turd. Can anyone lend me 8,700 gold? I promise to pay you back once I dominate the arena. No one can withstand my secret weapon of crapping rainbows. Don't buy this mech. This is an over-engineered piece of shit that simply slaps a lot of extra parts together. Just buy a real flying mech instead. With comments like these splattered over his mech, no wonder he couldn't make an additional sale. Vay's had learned a valuable but expensive lesson with this experience. I lost sight of my target audience. I thought I could have slapped a lot of components together without consequence. But the Bronze Leaguers are mostly a bunch of kids with little gold and credits to spare. One-star mechs acted as training wheels in the game. As training tools, most potentates didn't bother to make an emotional connection to the mechs they piloted, considering them to be horribly outdated. The Bronze Leaguers paid more attention to the amount of performance they could squeeze at a given price. It was a good thing he hadn't spent the rest of his time in vain. Other than stuffing Lucky with ores, he also extensively reworked the Fantasia 2R into a new variant. It had been his most major project to date, flexing all of his new skills to his limit, especially the light armor optimization sub-skill. The new Fantasia variant sported complete matte gray armor plating. Vay's had painstakingly removed its original armor plating and replaced them with the newer and more efficient Murin 21 ultralight armor plating. To retain and even improve the mech's durability, Vase had to recalculate every plate's profile and thickness, bulking up the mech in many areas. Despite the increase in armor, the mech's weight still enjoyed a considerable reduction, making it faster and nimbler on the ground. Vase felt highly satisfied with his work so far. He appreciated the miraculous powers of the system for allowing him to get accustomed to such amazing procedures in a matter of days instead of months. In a good mood and prompted by his rich creativity, he even added in the Fayette ECM and the festive cloud generator onto the custom mech's head. In keeping up with a ghost theme, he set the clouds to generate only grayscale colors, nicknaming the mech the Phantasm. Design evaluation, Fantasia 2R Phantasm. Variant name, Fantasia 2R Phantasm. Base model, Fantasia 2R. Original manufacturer, Kezia Armaments. Weight classification, light. Recommended role, Scout, Ambusher. Armor, C-. Carrying capacity, F+. Aesthetics, B+. Endurance, D+. Energy efficiency, D. Flexibility, C. Firepower, D-. Integrity, C. Mobility, B+. Spotting, B. X factor, none. Deviance, 8%. Performance improvement, 11%. Overall evaluation. You have received 50 design points for completing an original design with a performance improvement of over 10%. You have been rewarded with a lottery ticket for achieving superior performance improvement with minimal deviance. Vase widened his eyes at the second message. The system evaluated his custom work to the same standards as the industry, which made sense now that he thought about it. He had learned this in college but forgot about it when he grew delusional from possessing the system. Overenthusiastic designers who pumped in a lot of resources into a mech and only achieved a couple of % improvement over the stock model were regarded as trash. On the other hand, designers who changed only a few things here and there and can still achieve an improvement of over a dozen % were regarded as masters in their field. Vase had gained the system's approval with the Phantasm's economical design. With 3 cheap components, he partially re-engineered the old Fantasia 2R's frame into a stealthy predator. The Phantasm could do everything the stock model was capable of, but just a little better. The real star of the show was Vase's tedious swapping of its armor. The Marin 21 might have offered less protection, but it weighed a lot lighter. Padding the Fantasia with additional form-fitting plates offered better protection but still managed to achieve an overall weight reduction. Not every newly graduated mech designer could accomplish the same. Without cutting down redundant and inefficient sections while making sure their spots remained somewhat covered, Vase could never have improved the armor so effectively. And now he held another lottery ticket. Like an eager kid with candy, Vase quickly switched to the lottery page and spun the metaphorical wheel. Come on, give me something good, like a production license or a bag of credits. You have received a strength candy. Strength candy. Increases strength by 0.1 upon consumption. Strawberry flavor. Vase fell on his knees and let out a frustrated scream. Come on, system. I worked so hard the last few days. Why don't you throw me a bone or two? He felt like a wizard who decided to pump some iron in the gym. Developing his muscles was an unnecessary luxury that provided little help in his predicament. Well, since he received it, he might as well use it. After popping the gift in his mouth, he checked his status again. Status. Name, Vase Larkinson. Profession, novice mech designer. Specializations, none. Design points, 113. Attributes. Strength, 0.7. Dexterity, 0.7. Endurance, 0.6. Intelligence, 1.2. Creativity, 1. Concentration, 1. Neural aptitude, F. Skills. Assembly, novice -3D printer proficiency 1. Business, apprentice. Computer science, incompetent. Mathematics, incompetent. Mechanics, apprentice-jury rigging 1, speed tuning 1. Metallurgy, apprentice. Physics, novice -lightweight armor optimization 1. Evaluation, should pursue a career in designing space shuttles. He hardly felt the increase in strength, but after looking at the other benefits the system had brought, he felt pretty content. The system might not think highly of Vase right now, but he knew it could change in the future. After I complete 2 good designs, I will have enough DP to buy a new sub-skill. The past week, Vase benefited a lot from the sub-skills he had already bought. Even though they offered the lowest tier of knowledge, they vastly improved his existing competencies and sharpened his instincts. He currently considered whether to buy additional sub-skills or begin upgrading his existing ones. One would widen his base of knowledge and the other one would deepen it. Neither of the choices were wrong, so Vase had a hard time making a decision. The doorbell rang, interrupting Vase's introspection. He wasn't expecting any visitors, nor did he order something to be delivered. Curious, Vase activated the front door's camera. "Hey Vesey. Are you in?" "It's me, your cousin. Melinda," Vase exclaimed. He jogged over to the front of the workshop and met his cousin with a hug. "Long time no see." "No thanks to you, little Vesey." Melinda smiled as she ruffled her younger relative's hair. "I see you changed your digs. It looks very, small. I know it doesn't look impressive, but I'm stuck with it, so I might as well make it my home." The two entered the workshop's small living apartment and sat down on a beaten-up sofa. Lucky, who had been happily napping in the middle, meowed with indignation as he was pushed to the side. "Oh, it's so cute," Melinda gushed as she picked up the cat. "What's its name?" "I call him Lucky. I'm counting on him to turn my life around." Vase responded, then sighed. "I know you didn't come because you missed me. Tell me what the family wants." The Larkinsons had been an established family of mech pilots for at least 200 years. Though they lacked wealth and a deeper foundation in the circles of power, they managed to firmly root themselves in the military. Together with dozens of other families, they constituted the Bright Republic's unofficial military aristocracy. Grandpa's been busy at headquarters, so he couldn't spare much time searching for what happened with your dad. With his resources, the only thing he managed to figure out was that it wasn't related to the mech corps. Talk about Vase's missing dad lowered his mood. He tightened his fist. "I don't know where dad ended up, but I'm sure he's still alive." "We all hope so, Vesey. But life has to go on. We can't put our lives on pause. Your aunts and uncles are quite worried about the debt your dad accrued in order to afford all of this. It's too extravagant. They think you're still 20 years too young to take up the responsibility to run your own mech business. So they disapprove, huh? They only want what's best for you." Melinda replied as she put her hand on his shoulder. "You can still turn around and give up the assets to the bank. With your qualifications, my dad can fast-track you into the mech corps as a technician. You'll be able to get loads of hands-on experience repairing and modifying next-generation military mechs. Your job prospects will improve a lot once you've got a couple of tours of service under your belt." Vase shook his head. "It sounds safe, but it's too slow for me. I want to make a name for myself as a mech designer, not a technician or repairman. Most star designers start their career young. That doesn't mean you have to follow their footsteps. Without a formidable background like wealth or connections, you don't possess the qualifications to enter a cutthroat business like selling mechs." He wanted to tell Melinda that she was wrong. Vase did enjoy a background advantage. His father's mech designer system had given him a lot of help and could be counted on to help him find his footing in the business. But he couldn't mention it to his cousin. The system was strange and unique, and Vase might lose his life if others wanted to rob this advantage. "Melinda, I understand where you're coming from, but I chose to shoulder the risks. This is my father's legacy, after all. He gave up his home, his savings and even his personal mech to scrounge up the loans to fund this little workshop. At worst, I'll just be declared bankrupt and the assets will get taken away a little later. It's not shameful for an entrepreneur to suffer a bankruptcy. At least I'll be content to know I tried." His cousin sighed, but didn't press on. "I thought you'd choose to do so. I guess the only thing I can bring back to the family is to tell them about your resolve. Grandpa also told me that if you decided to stay this course, he'll lean on the bank to make sure they don't pull any dirty tricks." "Thanks. It helps out a lot if I don't have to worry about the bank changing its terms. I'm confident I can work this out on my own. I already have some plans in the works." "Oh. Can you show me some of your work?" Vase brought his cousin to the working area of the shop. He activated the terminal and logged into his Iron Spirit designer account. "I've been trying to make a name for myself as a designer in the game. I've made a deal with I can't say who. I only need to do well and sell enough virtual mechs to receive some additional startup resources for my real business. Let me show you my two latest designs." The seraphim awed his cousin for its graceful appearance. She grinned and pinched Vase's cheek. "So you started to fiddle with the Fantasia, huh? Do you need me to introduce you to some ladies I know?" "Melinda. I'm not a kid anymore. So other than its gender, tell me what you think about my mech." The seraphim showcases your fundamentals. You've impressed me with how decently you incorporated all of the components together. While I'm not too familiar with the Fantasia chassis anymore, I'm sure it performs decently in the air. It's just Yeah, I know. It costs a fortune for a one-star light mech. At least your phantasm looks impressive. Melinda commented as she browsed through the spec sheet. I'm not a technician, but even I can see you've worked hard reworking its armor. This is really solid work. If I was still in bronze, I'd definitely give it a spin. What's your current league? I've been in platinum for a while. I can break into diamond if I work hard. Heavens. Reaching diamond rank at her age would be an impressive feat. Only freaks of nature and nurtured aristocratic elites could boast such an accomplishment. Sometimes Vase felt that his mech piloting talent had gone over to Melinda. The universe wasn't fair sometimes. Melinda noticed Vase's expression and flicked his forehead. Hey, no need for those thoughts. You might not have inherited all of your father's genes, but you definitely have his heart. Besides, Iron Spirit is just a game. Many of my colleagues in the Bentheim Planetary Guard don't even take it seriously. When you make a living piloting and fighting with the real thing, a game just feels too vague. Nodding, Vase agreed with her words. I know. Designing mechs in Iron Spirit is just a springboard for my real universe business. If I manage to achieve enough sales, I can receive a grant of some sorts. I'll be sure to recommend your models to the Munchkins back home. Melinda smiled as she thought of pinching the faces of her cute little nieces and nephews. The Larkinsons weren't exactly unified like real aristocratic families, but they kept in touch even as they spread out over many planets in the Republic. The younger generation often met up and played together, if not in person then in Iron Spirit. Being left out of many of these circles due to lacking the aptitude to pilot a mech had distances Vase a little from the peers of his age. Melinda was one of the few who kept a proactive friendship with him. It was times like these when he faced some difficulties did Vase realize how much family meant to him. A warm feeling embraced his heart and he gave his cousin another hug. Chapter 9. After a hearty talk, Melinda had to leave in order to catch her flight back to Bentheim. As Vase accompanied her to the door, she turned around and bumped her communicator with his wrist. What's this? Vase asked as he activated his comm. It unfolded into a brochure. It's the Young Tigers exhibition. Isn't it a competition for younger mech pilots to showcase their skills? I hear the Mech Corps and the local Mercenary Corps organize this event to recruit outstanding pilots. The Bright Republic publicized the YTE every year. It had practically turned into a national holiday. His father even brought him to an event when he was little. Before he found out his aptitude made piloting mechs an unreachable dream. That was 10 years ago. Melinda said and reached over and tapped the brochure, flipping it over to the next page. In recent years they expanded the program to include a mech designer contest. It's not as thrilling as the mech battles, but the Mech Corps and a few big players pay a lot of attention to the people who do well in the contest. I see. Vase nodded as he read through the brochure. It's conveniently open to mech designers who have just graduated or are in their final years in college. I guess the Republic wants to make sure it hasn't missed any talents. You should check out the rewards. Vase did, and widened his eyes. First prize, Gold Cup, 1 million bright credits. Second prize, Silver Cup, 500,000 bright credits. Third prize, Bronze Cup, 200,000 bright credits. If he won first prize, then even if he couldn't meet the interest payment, he could at least afford other necessities. The raw materials to build up a mech didn't come cheap. These aren't even the real rewards, Vase. If you stand out during the competition, you might be able to get an audience with the real movers and shakers of the mech business. You can get job offers and commissions if they like your style. Vase smiled ruefully when he heard those words. The bigwigs probably aren't interested in a small businessman like me. I'm not one of those geniuses with fancy degrees from Mars or a Stellan. Mars was the technological capital of the Greater United Terran Confederation, the oldest and most prestigious human superpower. Stellan was a hub of high-tech mech companies and stellar universities of the new Rubarth Empire, the most militarily dominant human state. Most of those geniuses already have their future careers lined up, probably with one of the Galactic 500. Melinda responded with a scowl. When they come back to visit sometimes, I sometimes wonder if I'm talking to a Terran or Rubarthan. It's like they forgot their roots. The Republic is a third-tier power, after all. Vase lamented, not entirely sincerely. He loved his home country and its high living standards. There were benefits to loving in a peaceful backwater. Our next-gen mechs are probably considered last-gen by the first-tier superpowers. Those destined for greatness couldn't be contained by the small bright Republic. Vase knew it was no use to feel jealous about those endowed with great opportunities. It all came down to strength. If Vase failed to win the first prize, then he just wasn't cut out for it. With the system backing him up, he might not excel in anything now, but it could be a different story a decade later. He waved his cousin goodbye and returned to his terminal. He reread the brochure for the YTE and registered for the competition after making sure he met all the requirements. Good thing the YTE starts in 2 months. I'm not confident of winning anything in my current state. Hopefully it'll be different when time passes. FaZe went back to work. He logged into Iron Spirit and put in the hours to craft the Phantasm in his virtual workshop. Seeing each component roll out of the 3D printer and place them in the appropriate place helped him understand his creation further. When he finished the assembly and tested its specs, he put the new variant on sale. Fantasia 2R Phantasm. Tier, 1 star. Base model, Fantasia 2R. Purchase price, 3,600 gold minus 50%. Premium price, 750 bright credits. Comparing the new Phantasm to his earlier Seraphim showed a stark contrast in price levels. Fantasia 2R Seraphim. Tier, 1 star. Base model, Fantasia 2R. Purchase price, 8,800 gold. Premium price, 3,300 bright credits. His handcrafted Phantasm only sold for 1,800 gold, which represented a great deal. The next models after his first Phantasm would be fabricated automatically, leading to a slight reduction in quality and a doubling of prices. Still, at 3,600 gold a customer would not be disappointed at the Phantasm's performance. After FaZe proudly put his mech on the market, he visited the usual mech enthusiast boards on the galactic net and boasted shamelessly about the Phantasm. Not every mech designer chose to create a variant with a reimagined armor configuration. At the very least, FaZe hadn't found any other Fantasia variant on the market with a full-body Marin 21 armor replacement. A few days passed by. Nothing else changed except occasionally picking up Lucky's gems. The benefits it provided remained minor as ever, but FaZe still remained optimistic. Once his cash flow improved, he planned to buy a few exotic minerals and find out if Lucky was worth his gold classification. FaZe worked on a 4th Fantasia variant these days, this time focusing on endurance and energy efficiency. He wanted to design a model that lasted longer and could run over long distances without negatively affecting its performance in battle. Though it emphasized different demands, FaZe could still copy most of his work on the Phantasm to save time. After all, the Phantasm really presented a total baseline improvement over the original Fantasia 2R. In the meantime, FaZe's store page started to receive some views. Surprisingly, a repeat customer bought his handcrafted Phantasm. This event snake had also bought FaZe's handmade Seraphim. Perhaps this event snake could be called a fan. Then came the younger generation of the Larkinsons. While most only intended to give their big sister Melinda face by take a look, some of them grew enchanted by the Seraphim's regal grace or the Phantasm's dark elegance. One rich nephew impulsively bought the Seraphim with credits, wasting 3 months of his personal savings. A couple of other nephews and nieces purchased the Phantasm, recognizing its superior performance as an ambushed predator. A few even bought the 2RE as a joke, intending to surprise their friends with the model's ultimate move. Thus FaZe achieved 23 sales this week. Together with the original Seraphim, he achieved 24 sales in total, almost overcoming 1/4 of his mission goal. Only when FaZe finished his latest customization did he log back in to check out his store page. His eyes widened with satisfaction as he realized Melinda had given him some much-needed help. The Phantasm sold well enough at the start, but its sales tapered off as no one else seemed to be interested, as only an occasional customer would come and buy. They must have been defeated by the Phantasm in a match. Together with the 50 design points FaZe received from developing his latest design, he gained a total of 73 DP. He only needed a little more than a dozen mechs to accumulate 200 DP. Once he reached that point, he could treat himself to something good from the system skill tree or store. He uploaded his newest work in Iron Spirit, and again he painstakingly built up its first model by hand. Just like when he fabricated the Phantasm, he felt a deeper connection with the Fantasia chassis by being involved in every step of the way. Once the model had been built up, FaZe immediately chose to put it on sale. Fantasia 2R Nomad. Tier, 1 star. Base model, Fantasia 2R. Purchase price, 3,400 gold minus 50%. Premium price, 700 bright credits. The Nomad weighed more than the Phantasm, courtesy of its extra energy packs and armor plates. The Nomad nonetheless came without the other model's Fayette ECM and Festive Cloud Generator modules, which ultimately resulted in a lower price. FaZe judged the Nomad's performance wasn't shabby, but it lacked a certain wow factor the previous 2 variants possessed. I'm starting to run out of ideas. I don't think I can force myself to pump out another Fantasia variant again without purchasing new parts, which I can't afford. With only half a month left to go, Vase needed to do something about the mission the system gave him. The Nomad's introduction to the market might help progress his sales, but he doubted he could achieve 100 sales before the deadline passed. I need to go out and push my mechs in person. Frankly, Vase was too poor to afford a more sophisticated solution. While he gained a healthy amount of credits from the sale of his virtual mechs, he needed to reserve the capital for his mech boutique's future operations. Besides, his previous ad purchase an iron spirit had been like a drop in the ocean. Vase dug into the assorted pile of junk the workshop stored in its backyard, managing to scavenge a broken, window-sized holographic picture frame. With his technical skills, it was a cinch to restore it. He fixed it up and also welded a lengthy pole underneath its frame. Once it worked, Vase loaded all of his mech designs in the picture frame's memory. After a quick thought, he also added in some footage copied from some public replays featuring his mechs winning. Naturally, he ignored the matches where his mechs lost miserably. Ready to go out, Vase took the board and called for an air cab. Hey Lucky, you want to go out and take a look downtown? Once his transportation arrived, he took a leisurely trip to the downtown area of Rodrigo's Rest. Having lived in the suburbs for much of his life, Vase was more than familiar with its streets. He knew where all the kids hung out after being released from school. He arrived at the local gaming center and took a spot next to the other people holding their boards ready. Lucky meanwhile jumped about here and there, exploring the trees and lantern posts in perplexed curiosity. Vase wasn't worried he'd run off, so he let his pet explore to his heart's content. You new here? A grungy guy looking like he needed a couple showers asked. Yeah. Why are you here? What else? I have to sell my product urgently. Vase helplessly confessed. Anything I should know? The do's and don'ts. Grunge had mentioned a few short tips. Above all else, don't annoy the managers. They want kids to come in and out without any hassle. The two along with the others waited patiently for the kids to come out of school. Once the first eager teenagers arrived, Vase went to work. Do you need a new mech that's swifter and lasts longer? Then I've got a mech for you. Naturally, most potentates ignored the people soliciting their products. Only a couple of young pilots spared a glance, but their eyes only stayed focused for a second or two before they entered the game center. Standing for hours at a time holding an animated board tired Vase out. He gritted his teeth and carried on with his work to push his mechs into the minds of the visiting players. Things changed once Lucky returned. The cat evidently had his fill of exploring the environment. It effortlessly jumped on top of a trash can near Vase and rested languidly atop its cover like a king surveying his serfs. The cat's fine workmanship and agreeable expression attracted a few girls. So cute. Can I pet it? It's such a big baby. Lucky appeared overwhelmed, but Vase put a hand on its neck to calm him down. Please don't press against my cat. He's young and hasn't been out very much. After realizing the young women weren't out to hurt him, Lucky meowed and stared at them with his shiny eyes. So adorable. Let me take a picture with him. I love his liveliness. It's even better than the dog I have back home. Did you build him yourself? Vase coughed awkwardly and shamelessly answered, I was involved in its creation, yes. Lucky is unique and isn't for sale, but if you're interested in my other creations, how about you take a look at my phantasm? As groups of squealing girls tried to pet and take pictures with Lucky, Vase allowed them to do so as long as they behaved. The cat seemed to lap up all of the attention, as if he was making it up for the times when Vase appeared too preoccupied with his work to play with his pet. Nonetheless, the steady stream of girls allowed Vase to conveniently insert a few mentions of his products. Be sure to search for the Fantasia 2R Phantasm when you visit the in-game market. It's the perfect mech if you want to look good while kicking your friend's ass. Maybe 99 out of 100 girls paid zero attention to Faye's words. If the one girl who actually paid attention visited his store page, then Vase felt his hard work was worth the trouble. Surprisingly, his increased strength allowed him to stand on the sidewalk and last a little bit longer. Holding the picture frame up tired him a little less than he expected. His physical strength also translated into mental strength in a way Vase couldn't really figure out. He felt the effects anyway. This made him reconsider the utility in upgrading his other useless attributes. Maybe upgrading my dexterity will make my thoughts nimbler, and upgrading my endurance will increase my willpower. The system isn't what it seems in the first place. There's a lot depth to it and I've only dipped my toes so far. After the sun started to dip down below cloudy curtains horizon, Vase called it a day. He ate a quick meal at a local restaurant and took a shuttle ride home. Sinking tiredly into his sofa, Vase activated the system and checked his progress. Mission progress, 35 over 100 sales. He sold 12 mechs today. If his sales kept up the same pace, then he definitely accomplished the mission within a week. He also accumulated 198 DP. With just a few more sales, he'd reach the threshold of 200 DP, opening up a lot of options in the systems shop and skill tree. Though other mech designers might scoff at Vei's pathetic street peddling, all of his hard work had paid off for him personally. Naturally, Lucky contributed much to his success. He picked up the sleepy cat and stroked his muzzle. "You've done a good job acting cute. I'll order a few treats and have it delivered tomorrow." Lucky meowed in contentment. Vei's kept up his sales routine for a week. He visited different cities each day in order to maximize his exposure. Lucky always accompanied him, and with the help of his charm he managed to draw enough attention to his products to sell 100 mechs with less than 2 weeks to spare. He also accumulated a hefty 263 design points, but hadn't spent them yet. He thought it would be better if he received his next mission first. Congratulations for completing tutorial, part 3. You have received a 10-year combat mech production license lottery ticket. Please visit the lottery page to redeem this ticket. For completing the mission with time to spare, you have been awarded a bonus lottery ticket. The system sure loved lotteries, giving Vei's a bad feeling. His luck with the lottery so far had been mixed. "Hey system, shouldn't you have sent me another mission by now? Please do not get addicted to missions. The mech designer system only offers missions in order to guide its users to the right path. Only babies require constant hand-holding. Are you a baby?" Vei's practically spat blood. "Who's the baby?" "You are a baby." In fact, Vei's felt rather terrible after hearing those words. He had indeed grown accustomed to the system's guidance. Now that he lacked a clear mission to strive towards, Vei's felt as if he was adrift. "No, that's not right. I still have to prepare for the Young Tigers exhibition that start in 1.5 months. I also have to make progress in collecting 5 million credits to pay off my interest in 2 months." In other words, he needed to advance his skills and earn a lot of money. Vei's could work on that without the system generating another tutorial to tell him how to accomplish those goals. "Too bad I can't earn any more completion rewards. That reminds me, I still need to use up last mission's rewards." Rubbing his palms, Vei's turned to the lottery page. He ignored the option to spend DP for a lottery draw and instead selected the option to use the tickets on hand. First, he activated his bonus ticket. Same as his previous lottery draws, it only entitled him to win an award from the lowest pool of prizes. The low-quality ticket snapped in half, revealing a familiar spinning wheel. Vei's vigorously yanked the wheel, causing it to make clacking sounds as the pointer spun over a rapid variety of rewards. The wheel slowed down after half a minute. Time appeared to slow down as the wheel ticked forward in an exaggerated fashion. It allowed Vei's to read the rewards hovering around the pointer. Endurance candy. Alien party ears. 100,000 bright credits. Lantern of imperfection. 1-day haunt. The pointer passed over the endurance candy, swept past the strange ears, and almost landed at the sum of credits. Vei's never objected to having more money. You have received a lantern of imperfection. The system ended up defying Vei's wishes yet again. Instead of receiving something that he could desperately use, he instead received an old-fashioned burnished bronze device that had obviously lived better days. Lantern of imperfection. Light the lantern and shine it against a mech or component to reveal structural flaws. The revealed flaws are only visible to the holder of the lantern. The lamp contains enough oil to burn for 5 hours. This could be useful. Vei's remarked, actually a little impressed by the generosity of the lottery. Machines that could analyze and reveal structural flaws existed, but only high-tech researchers and manufacturers were able to afford them. The assistance of such a device helped prevent defective material from being incorporated into a mech. For some parts, it was a lot more troublesome to replace once an assembler combined it with other parts and placed it in a mech. Too bad the lantern only lasted 5 hours. Vei's had no idea where he could buy additional lamp oil either. The system, being its usual obstinate self, remained silent to Vei's questions. Now it's time for the main show. Vei smiled as he beheld the shiny golden ticket that had actually materialized in front of him. With a satisfying pull, he ripped the ticket in half. Festive bells rang out as a transparent man-sized pagoda dropped down from the roof. The pagoda consisted of 9 stories, and each story spun in an alternating direction. The first story spun to the left, while the second to the right, and the third back to the left, and so on. It all gave off a sense of grandeur to Vei's, as if Buddha himself had descended to give him a reward. The spectacle raised Vei's hopes. If the introduction already looked so impressive, then he surely wouldn't receive something cheap. Approach the pagoda to determine the tier of your reward. This was different. Puzzled, Vase took a step forward, and then another when nothing special happened. Somehow, he couldn't get any closer to the pagoda no matter how many steps it took. A formless pressure arrived that pressed down on his body. Neither gravity nor air pressure changed. Everything else remained the same. Only the pagoda itself rose up in the air, dimming the workshop from Vase's sights. Vase felt his vision dim from the pressure threatening to burst his head. Nevertheless, he clenched his teeth and kept putting one foot over another. When his consciousness was on the verge of passing out, the pressure disappeared. He fell to the ground as his breath wheezed as if he had run a marathon. The strange event affected him severely. He didn't exactly know what the pressure represented, but he hoped he did okay. Evaluation completed. You are eligible to draw a reward from the 5th tier. The pagoda transformed in response to the judgment. Its top 4 and bottom 4 stories slowed down their rotations, eventually falling still. Only the 5th story of the pagoda continued spinning its merry way. I don't know exactly what the pagoda did to me, but I guess did an okay job. Vase concluded spuriously. He really had little clue why the system needed to resort to such mysticism in order to give him a simple production license. I really need to do better next time. I'm not resigned to remain average for the rest of my life. Now that the test had ended, Vase easily approached the side of the pagoda. Its 5th floor continued to turn, whipping up a small current of air that blasted Vase's face. Even Lucky jumped down from the couch and inspected the strange floating structure. His face looked as if it was wondering what the FCK made it spin. A small, hand-sized bell appeared in midair. It was one of those bells that hung in ancient Terran temples. A small cord hung from the clapper that allowed the bell to make its ringing. Please pull the cord when ready. Vase held the end of the cord and pulled firmly. The bell released a delicate tingling tone, causing the pagoda's 5th story to shine brighter even as its rotation lost its driving force. Like the regular lottery wheel, the pagoda's many sides portrayed various prizes. Vase even recognized a few of their profiles and determined they were mostly last-gen models. This meant that the mechs first saw commercial release in the last 30 to 70 years, which was a fairly good range. Any mech models older than last-gen were considered obsolete. Their performance just couldn't keep up with the models currently in use even in an assisting capacity. The price of such mechs often matched the cost of raw materials and production, meaning Vase would never be able to make any profit even if he handcrafted the mech in his own boutique. On the other hand, newer models also presented a few problems to Vase. The more current the mech model, the stricter its license. Only trusted mech designers and large commercial enterprises received approval to buy them. In addition, newer designs incorporated more advanced technology that required special machines to fabricate. His 3D printer was just a run-of-the-mill current-gen product with no special features. It was capable of printing almost any of last-gen specialist components, but if it came to the current generation's fancy tech, then he may need to acquire millions or even billions of credits worth of production lines. The pagoda finally stopped its lumbering spin. Vase's stomach sunk as he recognized the white, medium-sized mech on its front-facing wall. Congratulations! You have received a 10-year production license of the following mech, National Aeromotive Caesar Augustus CA-1. SHT. Vase muttered as all of his excitement drained from his expression. His calm burst up as Vase received a new mail. He numbly tapped the message. It came with a lot of legal bullshit from the so-called Future Sons Technology Institution. Vase skimmed through the lengthy texts. We hereby grant you with an unlimited production license of the Caesar Augustus CA-1, valid for a duration of 10 years from the signing of the included contract. No matter how many misgivings Vase had about the CA-1, he was stuck with it. He quickly signed all of the contracts to get the paperwork out of his sight. He received another message a scant few minutes later, showing that the local had successfully approved of the contract. Vase now possessed a legal license to produce the Caesar Augustus. FC King Double SHT. Vase felt like he wanted to cry but had no tears. The Caesar Augustus had a colorful history. Vase happened to be familiar with it, because it had been a lesson in college on what not to do. The story started 50 years ago, when National Aeromotives, a renowned manufacturer of aircars and shuttles, decided to enter the mech market. They adopted a two-pronged approach. The first approach was to license a couple of mainstream designs, retool a couple of factories, and pump out loads of shoddy quality but cheaply priced mechs. The sheer quantity of mechs they made allowed them to figure out the intricacies of mech production quite rapidly. The quality of their mechs improved with each new production run. The second method was to allow Jason Kozlowski, the son of NAS CEO, to learn how to design mechs. He directly attended one of Stellan's premier mech design program. An important thing to mention was that Jason had been a spoiled brat. As could be imagined, Jason spent much of his time on Stellan attending parties and getting drunk off his ass. Only his superior genes enabled him to perform well enough in class to graduate. Once Jason returned home, he made a high-sounding announcement to the galactic press. He claimed that he would take just 1 month to design a fully original mech that would outperform all of that period's current generation mechs. Many industry insiders scoffed at such a boast. Forget about outperforming a current generation mech, many freshly graduated mech designers weren't even capable of designing a model that could outperform a last-gen mech. It took years of experience, learning many skills and acquiring many new technologies to even be capable of producing such a stellar mech. In any case, the public hung on to Jason's every word. A face this handsome wouldn't renege on his promise. After the announcement, a couple of black-suited men quickly brought the prodigal son away from the press conference and he was never seen again for a month. Some conspiracy theorists guess that National Aeromotives wanted the public to forget about Jason's pledge. They received an unexpected surprise when Jason showed up to the press exactly 30 days later. A slightly disheveled but attractive young man then proceeded to introduce his month-long effort. He domineeringly named it after the first ancient Roman emperor, for it was indeed capable of outperforming most mechs of the current generation. Just its majestic posture and stately head design showed that Jason spent quite a lot of time matching the mech's aesthetics to its superb offensive power. The Caesar Augustus offered supreme offense and supreme defense in the medium weight class. By far the most expensive component was National Aeromotives' proprietary armor plating, originally designed to protect its most luxurious line of space shuttles from direct microasteroid impacts. Though expensive and difficult to produce, the armor offered superior protection that approached next-gen standards at the time. The CA-1 also provided a variety of offensive options. Its main weapons were its 2 wrist-mounted laser cannons. Missiles mounted on its shoulders provided some long-ranged indirect firing options, while a classic sword and shield built out of the same excellent material of its armor made the mech a monster in melee range. While Jason showed off a holographic model of the white-painted mech and its admittedly impressive capabilities, the experts combed over its specifications. They quickly couldn't hold in their laughter. The Caesar Augustus hid a bevy of issues underneath its perfect exterior. Jason crammed the CA-1 with so many gadgets that it affected the frame's integrity. Any damage that got past the armor could easily damage 5 essential subsystems, either crippling the mech or at least take it off the battlefield. In order to save space, many of those subsystems got tangled together, making it a pain in the ass for any technician to replace even a single faulty power line. The mech also lacked endurance. It peaked early but had no staying power. Its missile capacity could be emptied in seconds. Its wrist-mounted laser cannons built up an alarming amount of heat that Jason had done almost nothing to mitigate. And even if he did, the mech's average energy capacity meant it couldn't feed the weapons long enough anyway. Fortunately, Jason hadn't been conceited enough to add a flight system to the already over-engineered mech. Its energy would just drain faster in that case. All of this meant that FaZe was now stuck with one of NAS's biggest commercial flops in recent times. The CA-1 was a white elephant that was difficult to produce and required constant babysitting. The most troublesome thing about producing it was that its special armor plating required a dedicated machine to produce. FaZe's 3D printer wasn't advanced enough to produce it on its own. It was impossible for FaZe to produce the stock model of Caesar Augustus in 2 months. He lacked the time, money, skill and equipment to accomplish such a cluster of a production. And even if he did manage to cobble up a model, it was a question whether it would sell. However, the system awarded him with only just 1 production license, and for better or worse, FaZe was stuck with the elephant. It's not like I'm stuck with the stock model. I still have the mech designer system. If FaZe could use the system to redesign the CA-1, he might be able to come up with a less demanding version of Jason's first masterpiece. He wasn't ready to give up. A tentative plan already drew in his mind. Chapter 13. The skill tree featured a virtually endless amount of skills. With enough design points, FaZe could become the ultimate mech designer, capable of drafting a complete design in minutes with his left hand while pointing out the faults of someone else's work with his right hand. Naturally, FaZe lived in a world where time and resources were finite, so he didn't delude himself into thinking he'd ever reach that point in his lifetime. For all its merits, the mech designer system represented an incomprehensible piece of technology. Sometimes FaZe felt as if reality itself bent to its whims. He didn't know how sapient the program was or how it determined its own limits. If one day the system's sophisticated AI turned crazy, entire star systems might get embroiled into war. The system in fact always addressed him as a user, not an owner. It acted as if Vase was just one client who conveniently picked it on the ground. If Vase's father hadn't given him the data chip, the system might have found a way to get its chip transported to some other person with the traits it preferred. This insecurity made Vase question if the system was using him rather than the other way around. Certainly the system didn't work for free. Some powerful entity had gone through the trouble of designing a reality-bending software working on principles at least 1,000 years beyond humanity's grasp, and somehow it ended up in an average person's hands. And it was a question whether the system will stay in that person's grasp for long. For all Vase knew, the system only treated him as a train. Once it reached its destination, it would leave without a word. So Vase felt the need to milk the system while he still could. So despite all his doubts and questions, he still skimmed over the skill tree and made a shopping list of skills he needed to tackle the redesign of the Caesar Augustus. Assembly, upgrade to Apprentice, 1000 DP. Assembler Proficiency 1, 200 DP. Assembler Proficiency 2, 400 DP. 3D Printer Proficiency 2, 400 DP. Jury Rigging 2, 300 DP. Electrical Engineering, Incompetent 200 DP. Electrical Engineering, Novice, 500 DP. Electrical Engineering, Apprentice, 1000 DP. Medium Weight Armor Optimization 1, 300 DP. These were the absolute minimum required to produce or to redesign a Caesar Augustus. Vase needed to become much more familiar with the tools in his workshop in order to fabricate the CA1 notoriously delicate components and put them together. And if he wanted to redesign the mech to make it easier to produce, then he needed to become proficient in electrical engineering pretty fast. Since Vase was attempting to fabricate a stock CA1 in Iron Spirit, he felt he should make a start on a purchase. He picked the cheapest option in the list and bought it immediately. You have spent 200 DP to acquire Assembler Proficiency 1. Please view your status in order to confirm your skills. Status. Name, Vase Larkinson. Profession, Novice Mech Designer. Specializations, none. Design points, 98. Attributes. Strength, 0.7. Dexterity, 0.7. Endurance, 0.6. Intelligence, 1.2. Creativity, 1. Concentration, 1. Neural aptitude, F. Skills. Assembly, Novice-3D Printer Proficiency 1, Assembler Proficiency 1. Business, Apprentice. Computer Science, Incompetent. Mathematics, Incompetent. Mechanics, Apprentice-Jury Rigging 1, Speed Tuning 1. Metallurgy, Apprentice. Physics, Novice-Lightweight Armor Optimization 1. Evaluation, halfway stepped out of the stupidity cave. His status hadn't changed much except for the painful loss of so much DP. Now that he had the means to produce a virtual version of the Caesar Augustus, Vase got ready. He logged in the game and entered his workshop. It was a good thing the machines in the workshop scaled to the mech you were working on. Iron Spirit remained a game even if it touted itself as a simulator, so it didn't want to scare people off by being too greedy. However, some people spread rumors that the game would introduce a future update that enhanced the gameplay experience of designers by forcing them to start paying for upgrades in their equipment. For now, the game simplified many things for Vase which he felt grateful for. He only had to pay 40,000 credits to get the raw materials for the CA1 delivered to his virtual workshop. And actually, the cost of raw materials didn't actually represent the value of the digital goods Vase received. The pallets of metals, plastics, ceramics and other materials he received were just a bunch of data that could be infinitely duplicated. The payment acted more like a tax in another name. Some of it ended in the hands of the taxmen, in Vase's case the Bright Republic. Another portion got sent to the intellectual property owners of the many mechs and components Vase used in his designs. Only a relatively small portion of credits remained as revenue for the BSBH corporation that ran Iron Spirit. Well, now it's time to transform these ingots and pellets into working components. Vase rubbed his digital hands as he approached the virtual workshop's 3D printer. The house-size machine was a souped-up version of the one he had in his real universe workshop. Much of its features and quirks carried over. With a familiar hand, Vase started loading the blueprints of the frame, the most fundamental part of a mech, representing the skeleton that anchored the other components. Since it mostly consisted of solid pieces, with the occasional hinges and joints, the production occurred smoothly. The young Jason Kozlowski hadn't messed with it evidently. Still, due to the higher quality alloys used in its composition, the construction of the frame took up half a day. Next came the power reactor, the part that generated energy from energy cells or processed fuel. In general, the power reactor was a mature piece of technology. Developers only tinkered with it here and there to provide a few more percents of efficiency or maximum capacity. They could be easily scaled to tailor a mech's weight class, and the CA-1 featured a fairly well-designed medium reactor. As a long-standing manufacturer of aircrews and shuttles, National Aeromotives produced their own lines of power reactors. Jason borrowed a premium reactor available from the company's R&D division and stuffed it in his design. The reactor required extra precision in the fabrication of its many miniature parts. Vase had printed engines from scratch before with the 3D printer, but this was the first time he took the trouble to print each millimeter-sized component one by one, and assembled them all together by hand. The tedious work took up an entire day. Vase felt he did an adequate job, in that the reactor worked. Whether it performed well, that was for later. With that experience over with, his work on the engine proceeded a little smoother. Unlike the reactor, the engine took in energy to produce motive force. It allowed the mech to move its limbs and run like a marathon contestant. Much like the power reactor, Jason also borrowed it from his daddy's company, so it contained little innovations that made it troublesome to produce. Vase grew highly appreciative of NAS craftsmanship when he finished assembling the engine. After that followed the musculature that made use of the motive force to move the mech's limbs. Cheaper mechs such as those used in agriculture used hydraulics, electrical engines or a bevy of other cheap alternatives. Combat mechs required something more sophisticated, to better emulate a living being's responsiveness when pilot connected to them neurally. Lucky enough, the technology behind artificial musculature remained stagnant for over a century, so its production went like a breeze. Next came some of the most difficult parts, the computer chips and cabling that provided instructions and processing power to a machine. It represented the brains and nervous system of the mech. The chips demanded the most from the 3D printer, but they weren't difficult to produce since they were last-gen technology by now. The amount of miniaturization and other fancy stuff that went into the production of a chip could only be taken care of by an automated program. Vase only needed to inspect the 3D printer beforehand of dust and faults before producing the tiny chips. Ironically, the cables required more finesse. As if aware his mech required too many cables, Jason chose a special mix of metals and insulators in different proportions depending on the size of the cabling. A single string of cabling could either be thicker or thinner at certain parts depending on its location. It made for a fine mess when you added in the sheer number of cabling, and Vase felt he was growing mad at the end. After a long rest and a good night's sleep, Vase continued with manufacturing the specialist components of the Caesar Augustus. These components differed wildly from each other, as Jason had filled in a shopping list of all the best commercially available components. The ECM, radar, boosters, gyroscope, cockpit, sensors and all the other components came from wildly different manufacturers. This meant that Vase had to watch out for certain issues on one set of parts, but needed to pay attention to a different area with another set of parts. Vase diligently read the documentation while he went over each component, so he hadn't been met with outright failures. However, many parts came off the 3D printer in a marginally acceptable state. Vase lacked a reserve of raw materials to fabricate replacements for all but the worst parts. It just couldn't be helped. He could only blame Jason for blindly picking the shiniest toys and rely on his super-duper expensive industrial-scale workshop to reproduce them perfectly. With much of the interior of the mech done, Vase turned to the most expensive part of the mech, its proprietary armor. 30 years ago, a manufacturer required a dedicated machine from National Aeromotives to mix a bunch of metals into a highly compressed piece of plating. Fabrication technology advanced since that time, and now that the armor's formula became semi-public knowledge with the release of the CA-1 licensing options, all modern 3D printers could reproduce it as long as they weren't too cheap. The Caesar Augustus required a large amount of plating for a medium mech. The large, bulky sword and shield also added to its total weight, almost pushing the mech into the heavy weight class. The production of the plates came with its own challenges. Due to Vase inexperience, some of its armor plates came out of the 3D printer with higher than normal stress or other issues. If the virtual 3D printer wasn't so good, Vase might get stuck with a number of half-failed plates. Damn. Vase sighed as he finally finished producing all of the CA-1 components. This is more tiring than I thought. There's a world of difference between 1-star and 5-star mechs. Hundreds of years of technological progress only made things harder to build. I really miss the simple Fantasia. The challenges he faced with this step alone broadened his vision of what mechs were capable of. Working on a near-modern mech meant for elites taught Vase what this target segment looked for in a war machine. An elite mech has to meet different requirements than regular frontline mechs. They pack as much armor and punch as possible in a reasonably mobile package. Energy efficiency isn't necessarily a problem when you can swap fuel or energy cells from a support group on the field. Jason wasn't wrong to design the CA-1 along those lines. He just went a little bit too far with it. Competing mechs could do almost everything the Caesar Augustus could do, but lasted a little longer in the field. Sometimes that extra time counted, so procurers wanted to be safe than sorry by picking the less exaggerated choice. The Caesar Augustus was also a bitch to maintain in a chaotic battlefield, so generally only wealthiest pilots who cared a lot about peak performance bought the models. Next up, assembly. To assemble the mech from scratch, Vase first put together the frame. The parts that composed the mech skeleton were built to be big and robust, so Vase easily got to practice his enhanced assembler sub-skill without much risk. The skill improved his ability to manipulate the lifters and arms that composed the assembler module. The parts that he wanted frozen stayed still, while the parts he wanted moved got shifted around just enough but no further. As Vase already assembled the power reactor and engine by hand, he only needed to place them delicately in the slotted areas of the frame. After that, Vase added the other components and systems that made up the functionality of the mech. The biggest piece was the cockpit, followed by the energy storage unit that stored the replaceable energy cells. All the smaller systems followed, such as the sensors and boosters. Finally, Vase reached the most troublesome stage. All of the components had been installed on the mech, but they remained isolated to each other. Vase had to connect each of them together in a mishmash of cables and pipes. In between these relatively delicate components, Vase also had to squeeze in a lot of artificial muscles. Sometimes that led to very tight fits. The work tested Vase the utmost. He screwed up many times, having to remove the cabling and do the placement all over again. Sometimes he had to cram a bundle of cables through a narrow opening between pipes by force. The stress and frustration caused Vase to slip his finger sometimes, causing unforgivable mistakes in the assembly. After a nerve-wracking day of playing plumber, Vase finally reached the end stage of the assembly. He spent a much more leisurely time putting the armor plates together. Sometimes the improper cabling caused the plates to fail to adhere in its position. Vase sometimes had to hammer the problem areas lightly in order to cram the pieces of armor in their place. It proved the parts he fabricated were of substandard quality. "It's finally done," Vase said as he sprawled on the ground in exhaustion. The diagnostics and debugging still ran in the background, but Iron Spirit took care of most of the issues that popped up at this stage. "What do you think, system? Did I do a decent job? Why aren't you giving me an evaluation yet?" The mech designer system only evaluates designs, not copies. Since you are not the designer of the Caesar Augustus CA-1, you will not earn any design points even if you manufacture it 1,000 times. Please work hard and make your own designs. That made sense. The system didn't want to bring up a technician or a factory supervisor. The main job of a mech designer was to make designs. The act of fabricating a mech in person was only done in order to understand the mech better or to ensure its quality. Vase could only rely on the numbers given by Iron Spirit in judging how well he built his first Caesar Augustus. And from what he read so far, the news wasn't looking good. Reading through the mech specifications, Vase felt all of his satisfaction disappear. He accomplished the difficult task of building a highly advanced mech, to be sure. His lack of understanding and his poor proficiency with the equipment caused several problems with the mech. The Caesar Augustus he fashioned paled in comparison to a factory standard stock model. Several criteria showed a few percentage points of deficiencies. Those percentage points might as well be a chasm in the mech market. When pilots wanted to buy a stock mech, then they at least demand them to adhere to standards. There was no way any sane pilot paid full price for a substandard licensed copy. Vase took the time to search up the Caesar Augustus and its variants, what few they were. Unlike in the real universe, the Caesar Augustus enjoyed a little more popularity. Logistical issues such as limited energy mattered little when you played Iron Spirit's shorter game modes, such as the 1v1 and the 2v2 arenas. The tricky problem of frequent repairs could be solved with a wave of the hand as the game took care of everything as long as you had gold or credits to spend. The players who bought the Caesar Augustus tended to be more affluent than normal, but also demanded more of their mechs. Their willingness to pay a little more for a higher performing mech didn't help Vase at the moment because his own product was trash. Still, I have no choice but to get rid of it. I've pumped a fortune of credits in its virtual construction. I should at least be able to recoup the cost. With no other choice, Vase switched to the sales page and put his first Caesar Augustus on sale. He put a tentative price of 45,000 credits. The price range made it seem like a deal, even if it didn't perform up to spec. Caesar Augustus CA1. Tier, 5-star. Base model, Caesar Augustus CA1. Purchase price, 750,000 gold minus 50%. Premium price, 45,000 bright credits. Hopefully some schmuck will snap it up without reading the specifications too deeply. Otherwise he'd have to go back to the store and lower the price again in order to get rid of it faster. He still lacked a lot of credits and had no reserve left to build another virtual mech. I'll check back in a few days. Vey said hopefully, but he could not keep out the grimness from his tone. One thing's for sure. If I want to untangle this cluster FCK, I desperately need to become proficient in electrical engineering. Vase checked his status, and found he had gained enough DP to afford the first skill in the skill tree. As a major skill category, electrical engineering was cheap to learn but very expensive to master, but that was a problem for later. Right now, he spent 200 DP to acquire the first tier of the skill, which the system called incompetent. Raw information and knowledge streamed into Vey's mind. More knowledge than he could handle tried to nestle within in his brain in a span of minutes, and it almost caused him to blank out. He dropped to the floor and tried to hold his screams as he held his head. Countless irrelevant pieces of data pressed against his mind. Lucky even got frightened enough to jump up to a cabinet, wary of any intruders. The pressure eased off after 10 or so minutes. Vase let out deep breaths as he tried to regain his composure. Most of the data seemed to have been tossed to the back of his mind, inaccessible for the moment. Perhaps the subsequent skill upgrades unlocked portions of it. Strange. In order to regain his calm, he took a break, taking Lucky out for a walk. He and his father lived near the stretch of forests and plains for many years. The house of his childhood in the suburbs had been sold, the new owners taking in the property with gusto. Instead, his father moved to build a second-hand modular workshop just outside the town. Its location closer to nature afforded better privacy and made sure nothing else got damaged if his workshop blew up for some reason. Do you remember a life before the system gifted you to me? The gem cat meowed with a puzzled tone as he explored the nearby bushes. Don't know, huh? Vey said as he stretched his arms and raised his head to look at the wispy, colorful sky. This is my home planet. I lived here for almost my entire life. The only time I left was when I went to college in the capital. The planet Rittersburg seated the government of the Bright Republic. They heavily controlled the climate in order to make it optimal for human to live there. Sprawling cities, fancy villas and vast stretches of terran and indigenous wildlife turned it into a paradise, an expensive one, but idyllic nonetheless. Still, Vase vastly preferred the rugged and untamed lands of Cloudy Curtain. The terraforming corporations who transformed the ball of rock into a life-sustaining planet only stuck around to do the bare minimum. They left with their fat paychecks even as incongruities popped up. The local air smelled different than the standard Terran norm. The summers never lasted long and it was cloudy pretty much every day. This was his home. He was an inhabitant of Cloudy Curtain first, and a citizen of the Bright Republic next. Few woes occurring in the rest of the galaxy concerned him here on this quiet planet. This corner of the galaxy was on the outskirts of civilized territory. It held few stars, not much exotic resources, and only a few small alien polities shared the Bright Republic's rimward borders. Mech battles only happened occasionally. Besides the wars between the Republic and the aggressive Vija Kingdom, the most the Mech Corps had to handle were lone criminals and small bandit groups too weak to prey in the bigger neighborhoods. This led to a life of peace and stability, an enviable state of affairs for some people. His father purposely left the livelier planets of Rittersburg and Bentheim in order to make his home in snoozy Cloudy Curtain. When Vase grew up on this planet, he felt no different from his classmates and other people around him. Only when he studied at Rittersburg did he realize that the rest of the galaxy moved in different speeds. It both scared and excited him. Eventually, Vase firmly entered this complicated, murky world in order to fulfill his dream to become a mech designer. Just this decision alone brought him into contact with the government, trade associations, suppliers and more. He felt connected to the galaxy, as if anything he did affected the rest of human civilization. Only a little, but it felt as if his existence mattered. What kind of crap am I thinking? I should go back to work. Vase decided, and led Lucky back to the workshop. In the meantime, he made a call to Melinda. Hi cousin. Hey Vase, I was about to mail you back this weekend. So do you have any results you can share with me? Melinda sent a few documents over the interplanetary comm. The Caesar Augustus is a rare beast, so the Mech Corps never officially purchased any of its models. However, it did come into contact with a few models piloted by pirates fleeing the authorities of the bigger empires. They even captured one intact, more or less. Did they do anything with it? The mech corps may be penny pinchers sometimes, but they won't throw away a functional mech. An ace pilot took it over and piloted it for a few years before it got embroiled in a border skirmish with the Visions. It lost its left leg and a chunk of its waist. When it came back to the hangar, the Corps decided it was more trouble than it was worth trying to fix it up again, so they sold the rest for scrap. Damn, so it's gone now, right? Yup. Recycled down to the seats. Well, there goes my hope of refurbishing it. So anyway, the mech Corps must have learned a thing or two about the CA-1, right? Nothing officially, but I tracked down one of the technicians that serviced the CA-1. That was impressive, and also a little dangerous. Melinda could get in trouble if she harassed a veteran too much. Don't worry about it, cousin. Melinda smiled over the comm. He found the Caesar Augustus to be a bitch to maintain, but he still misses it. He freely gave me the notes he kept about the mech. I've sent it through this connection, so you should already have them in your storage. That's going to help out a lot. Thanks for taking the time. I'm looking forward of what you can do. Be sure to give me a call and show off your work when you finish a design. Will do. When Faze returned to his workshop, he perused the documents Melinda sent over. The retired technician had conveyed his thoughts in a haphazard manner, with no apparent order in his many ideas. They spent quite some time to iron out the disordered words and plentiful jargon into something legible. What he got opened his mind. The technician was evidently proficient in improvisation and jury rigging. He kept the Caesar Augustus going for years even without official replacement parts from National Aeromotives. Though the notes contain no schematics or blueprints, just getting to know the changes and the reasoning the technician came up with already gave Faze ideas for his own customization plans. His newly gained skill in electrical engineering also helped him puzzle out the crude drawings of rerouted cables and shifted systems. The retired technician spent some of his spare time trying to come up with a better layout for the most problematic tangles. Not many of them looked viable, but the technician succeeded in coming up with some optimizations, making the mech a little easier to maintain. After digesting the material, Faze had the urge to work on a design immediately. He quickly switched over to the designer and started incorporating some of his ideas on the Caesar Augustus. He worked on the easy solutions first. He moved a few components, sometimes shifting them just a millimeter, other times swapping them from left to right. Following these actions, he uncrossed a couple of cables and rerouted them through a different channel. When Faze stepped back and admired his changes, he realized the technician's suggestions did have a basis on reality. The modifications he made according to the suggestions made the mech a little less troublesome to produce and maintain. Now that I've picked all the low-hanging fruit, it's time for the real work to start. Faze intended to redesign CA-1 practically from the ground up. Just making a few changes here and there just didn't cut it. So Faze bit his lips and started to test the viability of more drastic modifications, some suggested by the technicians and some he figured out himself after handcrafting its design in the game. The changes he sketched improved the base model only incrementally. With limited knowledge and a lack of component licenses, Faze faced limitations everywhere. At its heart, a humanoid mech imitated the workings of the human body. Though hundreds of years of progress have made a mech's mechanical workings increasingly more sophisticated, it still adhered to the same rules. If Faze arbitrarily cut off a few cables or messed around with its proportions, he might cause the design to cascade into an unworkable mess, just like if he messed around with an actual human body. Some people started to question whether mechs would evolve to constitute life. Faze wasn't interested in these philosophical discussions that popped up every once in a while in college. He did not delude himself into thinking he was playing God by fashioning new mechs. Faze always thought his classmates who talked that way treated the mech designer occupation as a luxury. Faze preferred to hang out with the more down-to-earth crowd that treated the job as a way to assist the mech pilots that defended their homes. A week went by as Faze made some accomplishments. He also earned enough DP to upgrade his electrical engineering skill to novice. With his improved insights in electrical engineering, he also simplified a couple of problematic spots. This necessitated a drop in performance, but what he lost in specs he gained a lot more in ease of manufacturing and repair. While Faze had made some minor progress in taming the beast, it still maintained its essential wildness and ferocity. I still have a long road ahead, but I'm reaching the limits of what my skills and imagination can do. He only managed to come up with a half-finished design. While he wanted to wait until he could afford a few more skills with his steady income of DP, he had to validate his design by fabricating it personally. Without getting hands-on, all of his work remained theoretical. Faze finalized the design when he reached the limits of what he could do. He named the variant the Nero after a famous person who lived in the same time period as Caesar Augustus in ancient Terran history. Frankly, Vase knew very little about history. He just made a casual search on the galactic net for some cool names and Nero popped up as some dude with a mixed evaluation. This fit in nicely with what he thought about his, which is what he also thought about his recently finished design. At least he hadn't gone ahead and named the design the bastard son. The system's evaluation of the design was mild, to say the least. All of its core systems and armor remained the same as its stock model, so the system gave him a low rating for effort. The only thing Vase managed to pry from the system was a base reward of 10 DP due to the design being based on a complicated last-gen model. He was ready to start fabricating a virtual mech. When Vase logged into Iron Spirit and visited the market section, he found to his surprise that someone actually bought his half-baked Caesar Augustus. The Grand Green Road. The username sounded like a complete stranger. Vase checked his friends list and found nothing. Searching the galactic net only revealed that the player wasn't a celebrity. Who the FCK is the Grand Green Road? Well, whoever he was, he saved Vase a lot of trouble. Whatever. Since the mech got sold, I have enough credits to fabricate the Nero. He threw the identity of the buyer to the back of his mind and entered the virtual workshop to go to work. He was eager to see if the Nero he produced could match the specs of a standard CA1. Like and subscribe.